I want to return to what I spoke about on Sunday night, which was the trade war that had been declared over the weekend. Remember that on Saturday or Sunday, tariffs were supposed to go into effect, 25% tariffs on goods coming in from Mexico and Canada, and 10% on goods coming in from China. Well, on Sunday night, when I was recording the podcast, the stock market futures were way down across the board. There was a lot of concern about these tariffs and how they may impact the economy, inflation, interest rates. And then on Monday, Trump announced that the tariffs weren't going to happen, at least the ones on Canada and Mexico. They were postponed for 30 days. Now, I think they're postponed indefinitely. And I think this really amounts to a surrender on the part of Trump. I think this is maybe the shortest trade war ever because it really ended before it began. Now, if Trump really just wanted to get more troops on the border, because basically the reason that Trump gave for this 30-day reprieve on the tariffs was because Mexico agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border. Canada, I think, also is going to do something to help keep fentanyl out of the United States. And so now no tariffs. Well, Trump could have made those phone calls in private. He could have basically said, hey, you need to bring more troops down to the border. And if you don't do that, we're going to have these tariffs. And that all could have been negotiated quietly and nobody would have known. But I think Trump wanted to get that threat out there to be the tough guy and to show, hey, look, I threatened these tariffs and look what we got. We got these great concessions. Again, he could have threatened it privately and not publicly. But I also think more important, it was kind of like a trial balloon to see how the markets would react. If the stock markets were way up as a result of this announcement, maybe the tariffs would have stuck. But because the stock market was tanking and Donald Trump wants the stock market to go up, I think that was like, oh, no, this isn't going to work. The market is not happy with these tariffs. And so let's call them off. But of course, I can't call them off for that reason. So I think Mexico and Canada did us a favor by agreeing to send some troops, because that created a pretense for Trump to declare victory and not impose the tariffs, which, would have done a lot of harm to America. Remember, we're all a consumer-based bubble economy, and tariffs are a consumption tax. And now I'm all in favor of tariffs, and I want to talk a little bit more about that again, because people say, hey, Peter, why are you criticizing these tariffs? Don't you prefer tariffs to income taxes? And I do. I'm criticizing the way the tariffs are being portrayed and what their impact is going to be. Because they're being portrayed as a tax on Canada and Mexico. It's not. It's a tax on Americans who buy Mexican and Canadian goods. But actually, even if you don't buy Mexican and Canadian goods, all the goods that you buy that compete with those goods are going to be more expensive as a result of the tariffs. So I think that Trump really dodged another bullet in the sense that we don't have to have these tariffs, and prove that they don't work, because all the goods subject to the tariff would have gone up in price, contrary to the assurances that Trump has given that our trading partners will eat the tariffs, right? That they love our business so much that they're willing to lose money to keep our business, which is nonsense. I mean, they're trying to make money, and if they can't make money selling goods in America, they'll sell them someplace else. And so now that's not going to happen. Now, the tariffs were left on China, who has already retaliated. The government of China has announced retaliatory tariffs against their own people. Again, a trade war is one of these unique wars where all you do is shoot your own troops, right? So because we are going to tax Americans for buying some Chinese goods, China said, okay, then we're going to tax our citizens for buying your goods, right? So everybody loses in the trade war. So what China did was wrong. I mean, if they really wanted to get us where it hurts, they should just sell our treasuries. Now, I saw Kyle Bass, who's an otherwise pretty smart guy, and I do have a lot of respect for him, but we don't always agree on things. And in particular, what he said on CNBC today about China, because the host asked him, he said, hey, what if China were to sell the treasuries that it owns? Is that a threat? And he basically dismissed it, said that's ridiculous. That's nonsense. It's immaterial. They can dump all their treasuries and it won't even affect our markets. Maybe it'll make interest rates go up by 25 basis points. I think he's dreaming that it won't have an impact, but he's overlooking something more important. Treasuries are not the only dollar-denominated debt that the Chinese government holds in reserve. Their foreign reserves are over $3 trillion. And in addition to $770 billion of treasuries, they have over $1 trillion of other U.S. dollar-denominated debt. Some of it is agency debt. Some of it is corporate debt. So if they're going to dump their debt, they're going to dump all that debt. So now you're talking about maybe 1.8, 1.9 trillion of U.S. dollar-denominated debt. Now, you don't think that's going to have a meaningful impact on interest rates when the market has to absorb that selling? And also, if the Chinese are selling, what do you think the rest of the world is going to do? Are they going to sit back? No, it's going to probably spark a lot of other countries to want to sell their dollar debt too. And so I think he is just glossing over this significant problem, trying to claim that, oh, no, China's got no leverage. They've got nothing. They've got a lot more leverage than people think when it comes to owning so much dollar-denominated debt. And some people might think, well, China wouldn't dump their U.S. treasuries or their dollar debt because they would only hurt themselves. No, they would help themselves. That's the best thing they can do. I mean, eventually, and maybe eventually means soon, U.S. bonds are going to collapse because of rising interest rates. The dollar is going to collapse because of inflation, or it's both going to happen. But either way, the Chinese government is going to lose a lot of money on all those dollar-denominated bonds. So the best thing they can do is get rid of them. And so the last thing we want to do is give them an excuse, because if they do, it hurts us and it helps them. But anyway, so we're not going to get the tariffs. But the point I wanted to make on the criticism I'm getting, because I'm against these tariffs, I would be in favor of tariffs, kind of across the board tariffs, as a better way for the government to raise money from American citizens than an income tax or a payroll tax, right? The problem is there is no way the government will ever collect enough in tariffs to replace the income tax or the payroll tax. So we're not going to get one or the other. We're going to have both. If we end up with tariffs, we're going to have tariffs and an income tax. And that's probably not a good idea because they'll end up raising both. Now, if we had a budget where they actually said, hey, here's an income tax cut, and we're going to offset it with this tariff, and it's permanent and it's locked in, it may be a trade worth making. It's hard to say. But the problem is Donald Trump claims that the great thing about tariffs is that he uses them as leverage. Well, if the tariffs are permanent, if the tariffs are ingrained in law to replace income taxes that have been cut, well, how are they leverage anymore? They're just there all the time. You can't leverage them if they have to be there, and you can't remove them if you're counting on it. In fact, when they're talking about the president's budget that they're trying to come up with this big tax cut, part of the funding mechanism were tariffs. Well, if tariffs are just a threat that you never actually use, well, you can't raise any revenue from tariffs that don't actually get imposed. So are we going to have them or not? But if we do have them, they are taxes on American consumption. Now, the budget that Trump is proposing has all kinds of Keynesian style tax cuts, stimulative tax cuts, the no tax on tips, the no tax on Social Security, the no tax on overtime. That is pure inflation, because all that extra money is going to be spent, and it's going to be spent driving up prices. And so it needs to be offset by either higher consumption taxes like tariffs that were at least as high as those tax cuts, or we need real spending cuts.